Hi everyone, I'm Marco, co-founder and CEO at Senis AI. We believe that associations are sitting on a data goldmine, and our view is that AI can unlock that built up potential. And I'm very excited to be joined here today by Jen, who is the CEO of the Institute of Internal Communications and truly an innovative leader. So let's get right into it. Firstly, thanks very much, Jen, for joining us today. I know we've been speaking a lot over the last few months, but one of the things that stood out from our last conversation is that you have a lot of sort of speaking engagements coming up. You've done plenty of these sort of engagements. You've just mentioned now that you run a podcast for your association as well. So I'm really interested in hearing sort of what are the key topics that that you address when you do these sort of exercises. So maybe we can just sort of start off with maybe a brief background on yourself, and then the sort of things that you find topical.
Great. Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. So a bit of background, I guess, about myself. So I am a marketeer by trade. So many years ago, graduated in marketing and business. And then I went on to work in publishing before the internet was a big thing. I was still on dial-up, if anybody vaguely remembers those times. And then sort of got myself into really understanding professional bodies and associations, from membership to qualifications and development and careers. And then after many years working my way through all those processes and becoming marketing director, I now find myself today as chief executive of the Institute of Internal Communication, which is sort of a beautiful blend of all of my career history, being someone that started out in publishing and content creation and understanding that aspect of it, seeing the World Wide Web take off and change the face of content creation, to understanding careers and membership bodies and the commercialness that goes with that, to then representing a community of internal communicators who are obviously dealing with the challenges of how to connect and engage with the UK's workforce, really.
Wonderful. Brilliant. Thanks so much for that. And then in terms of the sort of speaking engagements, I mean, I think you mentioned one on artificial intelligence that you're doing. Can you maybe start us off with a bit of that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's many in the world for internal communication and the changing workplace that we've got. There are lots of topics and things to go at. So obviously I spend a lot of my time talking about the value of internal communication, which is fundamentally there to help a workforce feel informed, but also connected, engaged and purposeful in their work. And communication plays a big part of that. And our profession, therefore, creates the content, the messaging, the strategies, but also understands its people and its culture to help those messages land and to help people understand where they're going and the journey they're on. And obviously with that, they use a lot of digital technology to communicate. So AI is, I think, obviously a big area that my membership community is invested in, because we spend much of our time creating content and trying to get cut through and designing digital channels. And AI is coming along and we need to embrace it. It is obviously, there is a lot of desire in organizations to use AI to create efficiencies, to look at how it can be used in things around content creation, but also how it can be used to expedite things from understanding employees and views and where they're at. So in AI, there's two areas to it. Is how do we use AI effectively for communication? And that's ethically is the big thing that we're working on. And secondly, as organizations seek to adopt AI for practices of the workplace, how do we communicate the effective AI on our workforces when they're having to work with it? And there's so much noise around AI and what that's going to do. So our job is to disseminate that and present, I think, a picture of honesty and transparency, but one that also, seeks to improve the working experience, but does that as well with great ethical principles of AI. But we're all overwhelmed and overloaded. So it's always looked to as this kind of, is it the silver bullet that's going to help with all those things?
Perfect. And you mentioned ethical use of AI a couple of times there. Can you maybe just expand a bit on what sort of using AI ethically means for you?
Absolutely. And it's a project that we're working on at the Institute at the moment. And I think that when we think about using it ethically, it's a set of principles really that we must have in our brains as we come to approach how we're going to use AI. So what does that mean? So in terms of ethical principles, we've got to be thinking around data, compliance, how we're making sure we're doing it securely and things like that. Secondly, around how we're protecting people's privacy as well. That's a really important area. Thirdly, as well, a really big area as well is one of the things that we know in internal communication and where we're at right now is people really do want human experiences, but fundamentally they want honesty and transparency and truthfulness. So when we're going to be deploying AI, we need to make sure, does it do harm or good to that agenda? And there's places on that. There's extremes on that. And it's how do we give people agency to do things without unintended consequences? And also, for example, thinking about bias and critical thinking and assuming and not knowing what we're working with. And it seeks to do things that create a trusted environment and they feel valued and heard. So for me, being ethical is thinking through those principles, applying it through a frame of risk management, through a frame of scenario planning, through a frame of decision making. So when we come to think about using AI specifically for communication purposes, we do it so it doesn't have unintended consequences where it is not inclusive, it is not transparent, and it doesn't actually give people confidence to work with things securely and protects the privacy of those in our workforces.
Fantastic. And in terms of sort of data security and compliance, what would you advise sort of association leaders that are kind of just dipping their toe into AI in terms of sort of setting up policies around data, compliance and security? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think look, we need to experiment with AI to understand how best to use it, but the word is experiment safely. So when we're thinking about that data, and it's that thing between if we're using open source platforms, so if you are using ChatGPT or DAL or Midjourney from a design point of view or any of those points of view, when you're putting information into it, do you know where that information is going? Have you educated people on consent? On their cookies, on where they're setting things up? Are we making sure that when we're running through processes that we're not putting secure information or identifiable information that can be, because obviously once we share it, if you take ChatGPT, it is a scrape of the internet. So once we place it on there, you're giving it back to the internet. So doing that really, really safely and securely. So that's about understanding the platforms, seeing where your settings are, knowing what that looks like, thinking about what you want to experiment with. Is it content? Is it information? Is it analysis? So thinking through what are the guardrails I'm going to put in place to make sure that when I enter that information, particularly into open source platforms, where that means I'm effectively giving it into a public domain, have I done it so it is not identifiable? Because there's many people as consumers as well, we don't necessarily understand where all our data goes. So we need to understand where that data goes. So it's making sure we understand and read all those policies around that. And then with that, putting in place a policy and communicating that really, really clearly, really transparently with the workforce so they understand those guardrails. It might be that you want to lock certain things down, or it might be that you want them to experiment safely. So give them a policy that allows them to do that and explain how that works, educate them. And that's, I think, the phrase that we've got to be in is really, really educating, because through education, we can create human agency, but one which is confident and one that's secure.
Amazing. And actually on the subject of making sure that sort of the team in the organisation sort of gets on board with the potential new implementation of AI, what would be the best approach in terms of fostering a sort of a culture of innovation and getting people up to speed, both sort of conceptually and also emotionally connected to this sort of initiative?
Yeah, well, that's, I think, about 10 steps before you even think about AI, to be honest. If we're thinking about, when we're talking about culture and the way that we behave and the way that we role model and the way that we do things. I think that's thinking, do I have that right environment and those right conditions to do that? So for me, I'd be thinking about what is the sentiment, the connection in my organization at the moment, trying to seek to understand that. So do people feel there is clarity in your messaging? Do people feel that they are trusted, that they are empowered? Do you have line managers giving people the right steer and confidence? Is leadership role modeling the right kind of behavior? When people behave and act within their team cultures, are they doing that in a way that is conducive? Do you have listening programs and feedback loops so that there's a continuous way that employees can feed in where they think innovation could be? They can be heard. And most importantly, is there a feedback loop? Because that's the main thing, is we want to be heard, but we also need to hear that that's been listened to and acted upon, even if you can't act upon it. So if you have those right conditions where people feel valued and heard, they feel clear on the organization's strategy, they feel clear that their role and what that means within that, they feel empowered and supported by their managers and their direct teams, and they feel their leadership is radically honest and transparent about the direction of the organization. So if you have those conditions and you set that up, then when you come to how you're thinking about innovating and using AI, you can do that with the right culture in place because you've set that strategy. This is what we're going to do with it. I feel really clear. I know my line manager trusts me. I know that I've got their support. I know that I'm involved in innovation. So I'm asked to be inputting. I'm fed back on how my ideas are being used or not being used. That's fine. I see my leaders role model good, empathetic, human communication, and that I can feel behind them, and I feel that they're taking me on a journey. So once you have all those places and all those sort of elements together, then that can allow innovation to happen so much faster, because we all want to innovate, but we want to feel safe to do innovation. So it's about how are you creating an environment of psychological safety in your workforce.
Brilliant. And actually maybe also very much communicating the sort of challenges that the organisation seeking to address, and the opportunities that come with bringing in AI, but also very much at a sort of a task level for the employees, so that they're not just aligned with the strategic vision, but also appreciate the value of this new technology in their day to day. And just on that point, what sort of challenges or problems that associations are facing now could AI help with? And you mentioned content creation, and that's something that we find that many associations that are using AI do use it for content creation and administrative tasks. Are there any other use cases that you think could be valuable for associations?
I think there's a lot, because often, it depends on your size and scope as an association, but we are trying our best to understand our members and understand our needs. And I think there's two big pressures on us from association. And I say that this is the pressure on us at IOIC, which is A, pace, how to move quickly, how to move fastly. B, sorry, I got to C before I got to B there. B is our members are time poor. They want to find things quickly. We are in an attention deficit crisis, as I call it. You've got about 15 seconds to capture someone's attention. So how can we make sure we use it to personalize and present and understand that information, expedite the way members find the resources that they're looking for on our website so that they can see the value in their membership? And then with that, then C is actually making sure that we have an agile approach to understanding member needs and preferences. So there is the data point of view. How are we bringing in the data points that we have? How can we use AI to help us add context and understanding, but do that in a much more fast-paced? Similar to internal communication, right? There's many organizations that will do an annual employee engagement survey. As associations, we will do often an annual membership engagement, membership survey. I think that where we're shifting to, because things are so fleet of foot and so fast and we need to be responding, is we need to be doing much more sentiment, much more regular check-ins and much more monitoring of data and more simple and quick, because that then gives us, whether that's quarterly whether that's monthly, but getting that snippets of data and seeing what's going on with our members and where their needs are and what they're interacting with, then enables us to respond to that much more quickly. And whether that's the benefits we design, the communication we design, the content we design, or how we serve up things that are relevant to them. So I think that there's many of that. And, you talk about content creation. I think that, yes, it can help us, but we also need to make sure as associations that our foundation and our reason for being is that we are there to provide robust, rigorous insights. So making sure it can be a support to that and doesn't hinder that in any way. So how can we make sure we maintain the core of who we are, but use it to expedite some of those content creation things where it's just serving up the information and how we source it based on member needs. It's a bit of a waffly answer, but I think for me, it's how do we use it to understand sentiment and respond more quickly as an association? How can we use it to expedite some processes? And perhaps potentially down the future, how can we use AI to help members navigate our offering?
And traditionally, what's been the way to understanding member needs without the use of artificial intelligence? I mean, how are most doing it now?
Yeah, I would say most, in my experience, in the time that I've been in associations now for 25 years, I would say in my experience, it has been through the annual membership survey, when we'll do sort of a really long survey. What benefits do you like? Why do you join? How do you feel about your satisfaction? What is our NPS score? And that can be very much kind of a big annual check-in, and we can review that. And those are still important. I don't think that's going anywhere. I'm not saying to ditch the annual survey, but that gives us 12 months right now is a really, really long time to respond to something. And often that can also give us quite a lot of quantitative data. But we need to be able to do is expedite the qualitative data and those conversations. I mean, I'm sure some membership associations, another thing that we do is, well, that's member events and member points of view, where we maybe run an event, get a feedback on that. What did they like? What didn't they like? So there are those regular survey points of view that we do, but I think that we collect quite a lot of rich data about our members now, and we can do things much more quickly or shortly to kind of get that real sense of sentiment. But also the bit that's really insightful that I think is really interesting as well is actually looking at, rather than, I think sometimes with a survey, you're trying to drive up your respondent base, whereas actually if we can look at the data and the interactions with us and how people are using us, that gives us a real honest insight of where people are engaging and benefiting with their membership. Of course, that depends on how you're collecting that data through potentially your CMS system as well.
Absolutely. No, you touched on a really important point there. I mean, AI is amazing at process those sort of long, open-ended answers to questions, and then drawing sentiment out of that, particularly useful or particularly fast with AI. We found that a lot of associations have been naturally processing that manually. And you mentioned time constraints across associations. It's difficult to do so. Especially if you're trying to conduct multiple surveys across a year, if include event surveys as well, and so then the bottleneck becomes very quickly apparent when you do have a handful of surveys, but perhaps increasing the number of surveys, especially if you release that bottleneck by using AI to process those surveys and practically instantly get insights and a strategic steer off the back of those insights as well. That's really valuable. And you mentioned processing or sort of looking at the interactions of our sort of members use or benefit from your offering. Can you maybe just expand a bit more on what those sort of engagement points or interactions look like, and how AI can help associations in that regard as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as associations, and depending where we often have a very, very broad range of benefits that we provide our members, from content. So what are they consuming? What are they downloading? What are they reading? What topics are of interest to them? To then CPD, how many people are logging and doing that? And what does that CPD cycle look like? to also looking how often are they just logging in, or how often are they visiting pages, what key pages are they visiting, where are they going, what does that look like, whether they're commenting on our communities, what does that look like, what are they talking about. So it's not just about how much they're logging in and doing, but also where are they doing it, and what are those topics, and what are those things that are really on our members' minds right now, so we can use that insight to then go, this seems to be a really big area that our members are talking about or downloading. How do we respond? How do we help that? So there's lots of sources of information that we can use to kind of pull together. And what we can do is bring those strands of information into an AI tool to help us analyze that, but also give us the sentiment and give us a steer on and what are they engaging with, and what topics they're doing, but also what are they not engaging with? What are they not using in your offering? And therefore the questions we can ask ourselves as association leaders, do we need to keep doing that? Is that because we can often do things because we think it's what everyone wants, but understanding actually, is that where people are going and engaging, and what are they looking at, is a really important part of that puzzle. We can also put things on our websites and certain points where we can ask for simple one-off questions and feedback. So again, you can pull that together into some kind of sentiment analysis to help us understand regularly where people are at. That kind of quick pulse check is another point to do that. And I think then what we also need to do is then we can model that, particularly if we're collecting that data per member. So we understand member A is logging in here, downloading here, commenting on discussions, looking at these resources, is really doing CPD or isn't. Then what we can start to do is understand from our benefits and the broad church of member needs, because we often have junior members to most senior members, where are they and where are they not interacting and what meets their needs. That will then enable us to A, decide are those the right things that we're doing, B, respond quickly to provide the resources that it seems our members are looking for, C, play back that we're listening and that feedback loop, and then design more regularly into a strategy that really gives a personalised experience.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, the sort of insights you can get from this sort of analysis is understanding what sort of what benefits are being used and which are not. And the reasons for a particular benefit not being used might not necessarily be that it's not valued. It might simply be that it's not, there's not enough awareness around that particular benefit. So, from my perspective, that's where complementing that sort of quantitative data with qualitative data and actually asking the question, like you do in your surveys, which of these benefits are you actually aware of? And then that helps tailor the strategy in terms of, okay, well, I need to promote this particular benefit a little bit more. So then at least we can collect some data in terms of, are they valuing this benefit or not? Because now they're actually using it. So we actually got insights from that perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree. It goes back to what I said a couple of questions ago, another challenge that we have is our members' time, right? So we have about 15 seconds or very minimal time to get our members' attention and to show them that we have all these things, and often they just miss things. And actually by doing that, as you say, it can earth it and it can help us push that, but it can also help us ask deeper questions, so it can point us and do we need to investigate that further? Maybe if we do an exercise on that benefit, well, it's really unknown by the members and we really put some effort behind it and get that sentiment and qualitative behind it, then that gives us another point of informity going, they actually do value it, they want it more. Right, we'll take this forward. Or B, well, we pushed it, they don't seem to want it. They seem to want us to be over here. So how do we balance against all of that? Information is power, really, and understanding that is really, really powerful, I think, to helping us as not only our members time poor, but us as association people are really time poor. So we have a lot of priorities and a lot of things we need to push, but actually being more focused. So we're aligning what we have with what people want and what people need, and being sure that we've done everything we can is going to put us in a better position to really drive up positive membership experiences.
Exactly. And drilling down into who they actually are. So there's, an initial analysis is, well, this percentage of my member base, benefits from this particular aspect of my offering. But then looking at sort of segmentation underneath that, who exactly as a percentage of my team members, as a percentage of my individual members, appreciate this aspect of my offering. So in that regard, what sort of segmentation have you done in your work in terms of your analysis?
Sure. So I think that where we've started with is there's two sides. There's obviously the collection of the data of what members are using and not using and that side of it. But segmenting it into audience, there's two aspects we started with is what member level are they? So are they working, because as membership organizations, depending on where you are on that as a journey, you kind of know by their grade of membership, whether they are junior, mid, senior. So you can then really start to see, first of all, by grade, by their career stage, because you can assume if they're an early career stage, you're like, why aren't they using those benefits? And that could be an awareness piece. So that's A. And then B is around their term and their life, I'm trying to find the right phraseology now, their life cycle of membership. So are they only been a member for 1 year? Have they been a member are they 2 years in? Because you would expect the longer they've been a member, the more they understand the benefits, or maybe they don't over time. So I think when you can segment on those two areas, which is what we started to look at. So A, are they junior and it's their first year of membership? How has that gone? Because if we lose them after year one, that's really, really hard to get them back and to keep them. So that's a really important piece. And are we serving that up? So we've really started against by their career stage and their stage of membership with us.
Perfect. And have you noticed a difference at all in engagement across different stages? So whether it be sort of first years, second years, or across the board?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we've certainly found our weak point in our analysis as a membership has been members in their first year of membership. Getting them to understand the benefits and to really connect. There seems to be a sort of we're really good at joining their year one, onboarding them, getting them set up, and then it peters off and they seem to then, because they become busy or they've used it really quickly in the first few months and they haven't seen that regular enough touch point to help you see how you're mirroring their career journey and their needs. So for us, actually what we've seen is that our retention really struggles if we don't keep them after the first year of membership. So now the challenge is to work out, well, where is that going wrong? How can we use the AI then to understand where that is going wrong? Is it going wrong because they join and then they're just not fully engaged, they don't get the value of accreditation? Is it because they joined for a reason of, say they wanted support or knowledge or in one area and they just haven't found it? Or is it because we haven't breadcrumbed the first year of membership enough with them to see that there's a longevity to it and we can be a real supporting hand through it? Or is it that we just haven't been relevant enough to their needs? So now we can really start to drill into what goes wrong at that first year stage, irrelevant of their career stage. So how can we address that? And I think the thing that we're finding is that certainly we seem to be really good at onboarding, then it seems to go quite quiet. So we need to find more breadcrumbs and we need to find more way of personalizing their journey. So I'm the first year of membership. I'm a senior in my career. All you've done is push to me CPD. I don't want CPD. I'm looking for thought leadership. I'm looking for the latest trends and analysis, but that's been low down in our communication to them. So actually what we need to do is push this area and against their topic of interest. Or I am just starting my career and I'm really looking to how to develop my skills. So, okay, have we fed the right things to you that show that we can support you on that? So I think that's the phase that we're now in.
And trying to do that based on gut instinct.
Very difficult.
Very difficult indeed. And, we found that, a lot of associations, they rely heavily on their instinct, which of course has got them as far as they've gotten, which, and there's nothing wrong with that. But this level of analysis, certainly, the journey that you've undertaken is you're able to sort of really, outline with anatomical specificity which where are the challenges and what are the reasons for those challenges? So it's like, yes, okay, we need to, improve overall engagement, but that doesn't really say much. It's like, well, there's about 20, 30 different initiatives that you could take on. Nobody has, time to do everything. And also, what if 90% of those initiatives don't lead to anything? I mean, the way to really de-risk that is by honing in on exactly where the challenges are. And I suspect many associations are going to see that their year one members are really the most sort of at risk, and they're the most delicate. They're the ones that, they're just joining, they're just finding their feet. They might feel a little bit out of place, and, nurturing those year one members is crucial. But then the question is, how do you nurture them? Well, then maybe looking at, what the feedback has been, looking at those behavior patterns, what their preferences are. And that's a really, strong starting point, because then that can lead to, the strategic strategy planning and development. That makes a lot of sense. And
yeah, I'm just going to say I totally agree with that. And I think that the other thing as well, I'm just going to for everyone listening as well, is to IOIC, I have a team of 10. I have no big HQ resource fundamental. I don't sit here as someone going, that sounds easy, I bet you've got all the resource. I don't. So one of the things I have to have real responsibility as a leader is, my team are important. I couldn't do without them, but I need to prioritize their work, because otherwise trying to do everything all at once is really, really, really overwhelming. And then what this can do is it can help you prioritize, but also going back to my earlier point, if you set up the AI and the data, it can help us experiment, course correct, report back, be agile, rather than go a year on that and then go, oh gosh, we got that wrong for a year. If we'd gone there in a year, we can respond. It's bringing in that side of things, which I think is really difficult when we're low resourced. And for me, I can now direct my team going, look guys, the data tells us, let's give this a go for a month, do a bit of check-in. Has that made an impact? No, right, let's try again. So I think it helps to create that kind of approach to it and a mindset to it when we're thinking about it. And I would say as well, sometimes your gut instinct, your data can support your gut instinct, which is quite nice.
Absolutely. And what's the impact on organizations if you're just sort of dumping a whole bunch of initiatives on your staff, which then could, let's say they then don't lead to the results that you're after? What's the impact on that?
You can feel really deflated. Yeah. You can feel, membership bodies are fickle and they're precious, and our members are important, and we work really, really hard. We work in a not-for-profit environment. We work with a real clear purpose, and one that when you work in an association that it rings true to you. And if you're working all the time and you're trying and you're not seeing any result, it can feel really, really deflating. It can feel demotivating. But I think that if you can bring in this sense of the positive feedback as well as just what needs to be improved is a really important part of keeping morale up. But it's also a really important part of, if you can adopt this kind of approach of making them feel in control of trying to fix it, making them feel like, okay, I can see a way I can do this. I feel empowered to give it a go. I feel I like a bit of innovation. I like moving a bit differently. But also as well, I feel like I've got really clear priorities. The main thing my team say to me is, Jen, how are we going to do all of this? Burnout, how many hours are there in the day? So it's really important for me to keep people feeling like it's structured, like it's prioritized, but also as well that therefore when we do things, we can keep moving and keep driving and keep moving forward, but also find where the good things are that are working. Because I think we need to be thinking about morale, we need to be thinking about their involvement, but also be thinking about their well-being.
Absolutely. And then as the initiative progresses, also, and I know that you track your KPIs religiously, so maybe you can talk a little bit to the the value of staying on top of those KPIs and actually then having a sort of quantifiable measuring stick that you can also then present internally and say, guys, this initiative has just moved this needle to this. right?
Yeah.
Or it's actually gone in reverse. So we've really got to backpedal on this one. But maybe you can talk to your experience in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, I am quite religious and annoying about KPIs, which my team know how much I love data, and I do love a good spreadsheet and a good dashboard. I can't help it. So obviously, as part of this process, we've built some really good dashboards that we can touch into. So we created a sort of where we're going on the top goals. Dashboard. Are we achieving the annual goals that we set? How are we moving toward them? So we've got kind of a red, amber, green on that. So how are we getting there? We've built a membership KPI dashboard, which really helps us understand daily how we're doing on new members, how we're doing on retention, how we're doing on general satisfaction and where things are going. And then we've built an engagement dashboard so that we can really see, well, what members logged into, what are they using? Has engagement gone up or gone down? And those are refreshed really, really regularly. So that's great. So we've put those underpinnings in place. But dashboards are only ever really good if you do something with the information that it gives you, right? So then what we've done is we've created now as a sort of new way of working. We have weekly team meetings. So we might just go headlines, what's going on, what's happening, what have we got on our initiatives this month. We always on a Friday have a what's gone well, what's our highlight, what successes have we had, and we need to celebrate the small to the huge as well. And then what we're going to do is we have a monthly all-team in-person session. So what we can do is use that to kind of go through the dashboards, look at what we've done that month. So what campaigns have we focused on? What sales have we done? What new initiatives have we tried? And when I say new initiatives, it might be just changing a word in an email or doing one less email. These can be micro movements, or we've set up or it might be a macro movement where we've put in a new benefit. We're seeing, has that changed engagement? Has that changed logins? Okay, how's that going? And then what that does is gives us every month the chance to reflect on what we've done, see some achievements, and sometimes there's some good movements, and sometimes they stay still, and sometimes they take a little step back. But then we are in control as a team to respond to that and to shift the way that we're doing things. And like I say, I don't want this to feel like it has to be a huge thing. It's just once you've set up the foundations, so you've got those things in place, you set up the regularity of it, you set up the reporting, you set up that time for collaboration and workshop, then that's great. One thing we might do as well is we're looking at, so for example, we're looking obviously at year one members. The members will go, right, okay, that's come out of a team meeting. Let's set up a separate workshop. Let's chat this through. So we really use it to guide our work and our discussions as a constant feedback, but also to make sure that when it's good feedback, that we give the time to celebrate that as well.
Absolutely. And just on the sort of the markers that you're looking at when you make a change to, let's say, your email communications, whether it be to sort of promote an event or any sort of newsletter type, what sort of markers do you look at on that front?
I think if I was going to bring out headline markers, I'll be looking at retention. Mm-hmm. So how are we doing on retention overall? So I'll be looking at, so one of the things we look at, for example, is how many people who are members or non-members have attended that event, and how is that driving through as a benefit point of view. Probably the most important engagement metric I'll be looking at is engagement. So if we've done a big event where it's members listening, we should hope that would drive more engagement. So that's like more logins, more bookings, more things that people are doing. And then thirdly, a thing that we are going to be doing next year is trying to implement quarterly pulse surveys. So again, we'll see if that mirrors through on that aspect of it. But for me, certainly it would be retention. So we're seeing that go up. They're seeing more involved. Engagement, are they logging in and actually connecting with what you're putting on? And then thirdly, if we start to think about bringing in more sentiment analysis, how is that changing people's satisfaction or overall view of how IOIC is serving their needs? Yeah,
well, that's fantastic that you're increasing the frequency of your pulse surveys to really sort of keep your finger on the on the pulse.
Absolutely. And the other thing are we doing with it as well, we're increasing our pulse surveys, which is when we're proactively asking members, or we're embedding questions at a certain point in the user journey to tell us how they're feeling about their membership or what they want improved on. What we're going to be doing as well, which is the cornerstone of good internal communication, is making sure we do feedback loops. So what we do is we make sure we do that, and then every quarter we go, well, members, we heard this from you, this is what we're doing about it, you said this, but this is why we can't do this. So it feels like the members are involved as well, and their participation and their feedback is not going unnoticed.
Okay. And just on your members are either sort of individuals that are looking to progress in their career, or they're sort of team members as well. So could you maybe just talk a little bit on what type of member you serve?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are an individual membership association. But you can join in two ways. You can sign up as I'm Jen. I'm going to pay a monthly direct debit, and I'm a member, and I'm going to potentially self-fund, or I'm going to claim that back through my expenses, etc., etc. Or the other way people can join is what we've pushed really hard, as well as what is corporate membership, or we've called it team membership as well, where essentially someone maybe is head of internal comms and has a team of 10 working in a big corporate company, and they want to support their colleagues with the learning we provide, the resources we provide. So they'll sign up their entire team for membership. So there is often when you're thinking about engagement and retention, you're looking at it through slightly two different angles. So with an individual, it can feel much more personal. With a team, it probably has to be more value driven. Like, I've spent X for my team to benefit in Y. Have they benefited in that way? And often those individuals haven't made that decision for themselves to join. They've been joined in another way. So you have a slightly challenging or different challenging engagement actions that you need to put in place. So looking at it through those two different lenses helps us to think about that.
Okay. And the benefits, they broadly revolve around sort of internal communications, right? So, and what are the, let's say, what are the sort of the risks of not getting internal communications right, if that makes sense?
Yeah. From an organizational point of view. So, like I say, so our members are typically internal comms managers, heads of, directors, execs, officers, working largely within big corporate organizations where there is an internal communication function. The risk of not getting internal communication right for big employers, big organizations, they across some really key areas. One is trust. So, my employees trust me? Will they, because if you get trust, you get productivity, right? You get people knowing where they're going, they're on that journey, they're part of the brand. You also, another key area is retention. So how do we retain talent? We find that if communication is rated excellent in an organization, they're more likely to stay because they feel a positive affirmation towards them. They feel the way that they are spoken to, they're given clarity, their involvement, the culture is to do that. Another key area, of course, is engagement. So engaged employees, they have more likelihood to understand their role and deliver on performance for the organization. Another key area as well is around change and transformation. Many organizations deliver massive change and transformation programs. And often why change and transformation goes wrong is because communication isn't right. So you are more likely to meet those goals if you've really thought about your change and transformation. And finally, another area I'll point out is advocacy. So how our employees speak about us as a brand, whether that's as an employer brand, as a consumer brand, or as an advocate for your organization. Those things, because what happens inside is always reflected outside, and that is much less control perhaps than it used to be. So certainly trust, engagement, productivity, performance, change and transformation, and advocacy.
Okay. And it's interesting because the change and transformation, that reminds me at the start of our conversation in terms of implementing or introducing AI into the organization. So I think a lot of people would find a lot of value in understanding how to introduce that level of change, particularly when we're talking about a brand new technology as well. And just going back to understanding your members' needs for pretty much any association. I guess the question is, what's the risk of sort of not fully understanding your members' needs?
I think the main risk is relevance, because if we don't understand their needs, and so it's a bit like I say to internal communicators. So how do I, address that? my leaders and get their buy-in from what I'm doing. It's, well, what do they need? What are their problems? What are they dealing with? What's keeping them up at night? What are the things they're struggling with in their day job or that they can't meet? If we don't listen or seek to understand through qualitative and quantitative measures where their needs are, how can we address them? And therefore, if we don't address them, then you become irrelevant because, well, I'm here in my job. I'm trying to think of another profession. I'm probably an internal communicator, but let's just say I'm here in my job as an internal communicator and I've been given a brief to implement a whole new intranet for the company. That's my challenge. I've gone to my association. There's nothing there that I need. They have no resources. It's not relevant. I've searched everywhere. I can't find it. There's no discussions. You're not relevant. I will walk away within year one. And once you lose them, you can't get them back. So I think it's being relevant to them. And when I started my career in associations 25 odd years ago, the main method of communication with members back then was just your membership magazine. And there wasn't user-generated content. There wasn't the plethora of resources and things that we can now find. The challenge we have now as associations is that whole world is entirely different. So if you can't present something relevant, but it's also robust under your values, they know they're getting the top thinking, they're just going to go elsewhere because the World Wide Web will find them something, and therefore you'll be deemed as something that's not relevant to their needs for their career.
Absolutely. And this is why I'm so passionate about analyzing data using AI, because this really sort of underscores the potential downside of losing relevance across your member base. So at the heart of it, as you say, understanding your members. Now that all sounds well and good, but when you have a small team that's really constrained on time, having that helping hand from technology in order to process that survey data, in order to process those markers, ultimately the goal is to ensure that you remain relevant, not just today, but also, for many years to come. There are many associations that have been around for, over 100 years. So it's a real shame to see many of them, face these challenges, and what we're sort of advocating for here is an albeit initially rather daunting shift in the way we process data, but ultimately it's about giving back your time to your team so that you can achieve a lot more with analyzing that data, but do so in a fraction of the time.
Absolutely. As I said, I'm 10. I've got 10 people in the, and that's from buying the milk, doing the finances, to delivering content, training, qualifications, events, conferences, awards. We do an awful lot. And we have spent a lot of time this last year really investing in setting up those foundations, as I've mentioned earlier, whether that's through the dashboards or trialing and erroring with the AI and how we can do that. Because we have been working kind of a little bit blindly up, I suppose, apart from our annual survey, and knowing that and looking at kind of commercial revenue figures. So I think for me, and seeing the way that things are changing, and also we have the challenge as well for membership bodies. We have so many different generations in our membership as well that like to interact and consume and do things in different ways with you. So for me, taking the time to bring in the expertise to help us set those foundations up and how we can create that process that I was talking about earlier is really, really empowering for us as a small team, particularly when we're so overwhelmed, and prioritizing so that we know what we're doing is meeting our member needs is going to help keep us relevant. Really, really helps us feel like, okay, we're in control. We know the steps. We know the things we've got to do. Somehow it makes things feel less overwhelming, I think.
Absolutely. And if you could give a message to an association leader that fully appreciates and understands now the importance of deep, understanding in terms of member preferences, behavior, and what the impact is on their relevancy. But if they're just sort of unclear on how to start, so maybe you can just give sort of Jen's 3-step, 5-step guide at a real sort of high level across data, AI, KPIs, all of these good bits.
Oh, 3 steps. Okay, I'll try and make it really considered.
It can be fun.
I think the first thing I would say, as an association leader, the thing you need to really do first of all is understand where are my data points in my business. So where do I collect that insight? And I'm not just talking about surveys. I'm talking about how do I use analytics? How do I use email open rates? Do I collect in my CMS the right ways for me to understand where people are logging in or not logging in? So I think understand your data sources, and therefore then you can start to understand how I can, from those data sources I really need to understand and how I can map them. So how do I source what they're doing? But B, how do I then align it with their length of membership, their level of membership? Are you collecting it? Do you have the infrastructure in place to give you that kind of data point collection? And then once you've got that, then you can start to think about, well, okay, so if I've got all that information, what are the 3 things I really need to know? The 3 things that are really going to help solve my business? Is it that I really, really need to know? Because I can see you might be, as a leader, looking at your accounts, right? So you might be going, membership's just not going down, or it's really flat. So that can point you in a direction. Well, I want to understand that piece of information. Or it could be that your events are not moving. So you'll have another day. We're all looking at our accounts, I hope, but that can kind of start to give you a steer on that. And then I think I'd start with 3 or 4 kind of top pieces of insight I want to gain. What are the main things I need to, and prioritize that. I think one of the mistakes we made is we think when we got so excited about data, we wanted a dashboard for everything, and just don't need it. Didn't need it. It wasn't relevant enough. It wasn't going to, it was just, we were getting a bit greedy, or we can look at it. So why not? Actually, we're like, no, what we need to understand is we can see membership is where we want to focus in our strategy. That's what the board have given me. I'm looking at my figures. They look okay, but they're not going as fast as I can. Let me seek to understand that picture. So retention, engagement, login. And that gave us our area of clarity to focus on. So for me, understand your data sources, then understand from that what are the things from looking at the business and general sentiment we have, that gut instinct that we've been talking about, that I really want to seek to drive some really strong data points around that then are going to help actually we're going to do something with. I think the main thing is don't analyze data you can't do anything with, because then it's just, that's where we made that mistake. We were like, well, we can't do anything with that data. It's just nice to know. But with engagement data and retention data and length of membership data, I can do something with that data to make a difference. So I think was do data sources, don't measure everything, and then do something and seek to create dashboards that you can do something with to course correct or shift.
And once you have those dashboards, what would you say would be the next step?
The next step is to make sure your team really understand them, the team are using them, because if we've got it as leaders and we're all looking at it, but we're not sharing it to make an action plan around it, then we're not going to move the needle. And often, we've got small teams and not everyone is really, really comfortable with data or reading a dashboard or understanding with it. So make sure your team are involved in their creation as well. So they can really be part of then what we're seeing to then do something about. I think that's really, really important. And then I think the next thing is when you've got the data set up and you want to start doing action plans around it, set up some kind of regularity of get together and of discussion and of analysis. And then finally, when the data does move even in a 0.111% of something in a good direction, celebrate that with your team. Because we all need to feel that what we're doing is moving or has matter or has meaning. The greatest thing is with internal communicators and with this is that as leaders, we set a strategy with our boards, and then we need to make sure our team understand that strategy, but they can understand their role in delivering it and they can see their success in delivering it. So I think it's about creating that mindset, and that all comes with involvement.
Brilliant. So number 1, understand what data you have, where it's all stored, what the markers are that you're currently tracking, and understand what it is exactly that you're after from that data. So what is it that I need to know? Filter out any data that you don't need or that you can't actually do anything with, so that you're just left with the most valuable data. Make sure that your team understands and that they use it in order to drive their own decisions and understanding of where the organization is. Set up regularity on analysis, create initiatives as well in order to drive those changes on what you're tracking. That's key. And then finally, celebrate the small wins.
Thank you, Marco, for summarising that. That was much better. Hopefully that made good sense.
No worries at all. And just a final question, just thinking forward over the next sort of 3 or 5 years for yourself and for IOIC, what would be the biggest, win or kind of mission that you'd be really, really happy to hit over this period? Or it could be 3 if you've got 3 top of mind, but certainly the biggest one.
Yeah, I mean, as a business, as a business, the next 3 years, I want us to grow. I want more people joining our mission and what we're trying to achieve for the profession that we serve. So fundamentally, yes, I want more overall growth, and we're looking at how we can develop as well in the international space, because there's much more routes to markets for associations, most definitely. But I think secondary to that, yes, we want to grow. We want to, be international. We want to be bigger. We want to do more events. We want to do more content. We want to do more result reports. I want to show that we're on the pulse and have the latest thinking. But I think that underneath that as well, and this will be different for different associations depending on their model. But for us, as an association that isn't a license to practice model, people don't need to be a member of us to do what they do for a living. So we have to work really hard to show that, is to make sure that we stick with our values of an association, because it's a wild west out there these days in the way things are going. And why were associations formed in the first place is to be about standards, to give credibility, to give robustness, to give pride, to help people progress, to help people feel that there's been something that's helped them grow and they get recognition in their work and in their job. So I think it's to do all of that, but keep focused on the core of an institute, because I think as an institute, if we lose that sets us apart from so many other things. So for me, what does good look like in those years? Yeah, growth, but also a professional community that sees the value of having its own institute for their greater good, whether that's the future pipeline of talent, the pride they have, the investment they get in from their leaders and their organizations because they are seen as valued, and that also when a world when there is so much content that they know they're getting robust critical insights that really, really raises that standard and that bar. So whilst we all need to modernize, we also need to make sure that well, there's change as a constant, and being an institute, we need to take care of our constant, which is our position and our robustness, and why we all exist in the first place.
Wonderfully said. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think final thought. It's overwhelming. It's a lot. It's trying to do all of that, and I think that the way we do it, we just take it one piece, one step at a time. And I think the main thing is to keep conversation and keep dialoguing with our teams, but also with us as a community as well. Because we spend so much time doing that for our members. The one thing I'm most certainly guilty of is not doing that enough for myself and for the community I sit within. So keep conversing and keep sharing and keep learning.
Jen, thank you very much